brothers and sisters. Welcome to the Son of the North podcast. I am your host, Rex, serving as your guiding light through the darkness of this age. This is the 4th episode of the Son of the North podcast. If you enjoy your time with us today, make sure to like and subscribe to us and follow us on Spotify, YouTube, BitChute, and all other platforms where podcasts can be found. New episodes of the Son of the North podcast are released weekly, so make sure to follow us on social media to find out when the newest episode drops. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Son of the North podcast. Another week has gone by. We find ourselves in mid-May. Now, I recently finished a great book that I think is very thematically relevant for the topic I wanted to discuss today. The book is called Scouting on Two Continents by F.R. Burnham. Scouting on Two Continents tells the autobiographical story of Frederick Russell Burnham. Shortly after the onset of the American Civil War, F.R. Burnham was born along the United States northern Minnesotan frontier. Fearing violent reprisal among the Sioux Indians against American pioneers, Burnham's parents left Minnesota for America's more western frontier state, California. Burnham was raised on the frontier and in time felt the call to adventure. At the age of 16, the boy said goodbye to his mother and younger brothers and set off for the wilds of Arizona. The boy spent his formative years in those sun-baked canyons. Survival was the name of the game, and in that lawless wasteland that was Arizona at the time, F.R. Burnham learned to survive. A newcomer to the hostile region, Burnham learned to survive by carefully observing those around him. I'm going to quote some of Burnham's observations here on what he believed to be the greatest strength of the Apache natives that inhabited Arizona. The Apache are a proud tribe who violently resisted American expansion into their traditional territories. I quote, "There is no danger of knowing too much of the mental habits of an enemy. One should neither underestimate the enemy nor credit him with superhuman powers. Fear and courage are latent in every human being, though roused into activity by very diverse means." When speaking of the Sioux warriors of his native Minnesota, Burnham said, "The old Sioux warriors who pitted themselves against such generals as Custer, Reno, Miles, and Crook all passed through much preparatory training. To begin with, they hardened the body systematically. They controlled the mind and set it on definite object unswervingly. They well knew the uses of both love and hate in all of their shades and degrees. Around the council fires, traditions and tales were poured into the ears of the Indian boy until the time arrived when he demanded to become a warrior. Each spring, a class of candidates would come before the medicine man for physical examination. If not strong enough, the youth would be sent back to the care of the squaws for another year. Those who passed the tests were put in close training, both mental and physical, until, on some clear sunny day in June, the whole clan or tribe would gather on the slope of the prairie, near a stream and pitch their teepees for the sun dance of the young braves. For those who are unaware, the sun dance was a historically attested religious ritual among the tribes of the Great Plains of the Americas. In this ritual, as an initiatory rite, the young men of the tribes would ritually pierce their skin with hooks and attach these hooks to a large pole, which they would dance around until they were exhausted, as a sign of devotion to the sun god. When the exhausting test was ended, the youths were carefully tended by the squaws and nursed back to full strength in a few days. They were then passed over to the hands of older warriors for training with bow or gun, lance and horse, and in all the intricate lore of the plains. When they became proficient, they were divided into bands and sent to ambush each other's horses and equipment, also to maneuver on a large scale under the orders and the eyes of the great chiefs. If the qualities and training possessed by these men had been added to modern-day artillery and weapons, one hesitates to guess how many of our troops would have been necessary to conquer them. While ritual scarring may seem a little grotesque, Burnham admired the spiritual strength and toughness of the natives. While they lived thousands of years and thousands of kilometers apart, we cannot deny that some elements of the Plains native society closely resembled Indo-European society. Simply put, life on the prairies was tough, and only the strong could survive. Young boys, if they wanted to make themselves useful to the tribe, had to work hard and be tough and strong. They needed to be able to fend for themselves. These traits are common amongst most cultures that emerge in the steppe biome. The harsh realities of life on the steppe tempered the physical, mental, and spiritual strength of both the Plains natives and the Indo-European peoples. In the case of the latter, it is perhaps this birth in the fire that gave them the personal strength needed to pursue their own ambitions and expand across the Eurasian continent. Continuing on with the story, Burnham matured into a strong and capable young survivalist. But America's frontier was coming to a close. The wars with the natives had already been won. Territory was secured. With the end of the Civil War, the state of the Union was secure, and there was no longer any room for those who sought a life of high adventure. Like many adventurous young men of his age, Burnham looked to the next frontier, South Africa. With his wife and son in tow, Burnham left the Cape Colonies held by the British and went to South Africa's northern jungle frontiers. Burnham and his family moved to what was to become the fledgling British colony of Rhodesia. With the onset of the British Empire's first war with the Matabele Kingdom, Burnham enlisted as a scout in the Rhodesian Volunteer Army and sought to put good use to the tracking, survival, and scouting skills he had learned during his youth in Arizona. The British Empire's ability to mobilize troops to this frontier war was very much impeded by the lack of development in the thick jungled region. Thus, the only response to Matabele aggression that could be mustered was a ragtag army of tough, grizzled pioneers settling the Rhodesian heartland. Burnham's knowledge and experience in reading the land, following tracks, and getting in the minds of a foreign enemy ultimately enabled the victory of the ragtag Rhodesian forces. But Rhodesia is not the topic of our episode today. Burnham was an embodiment of the pioneering spirit that inhabited America's grizzled frontiers. Alas, Burnham was born a generation too late. America no longer had need for pioneers, no longer a need for men who had the spiritual and mental and physical toughness to brave the wilds. For the new America envisioned by the politicians of the time was an America of urban development, high population density, and money-making. Nature no longer had a place in the public imagination, and because of that, man lost his connection to mankind's spiritual proving ground. But this America, built by the optimistically naive politicians of the early 20th century, has, in recent years, clearly proven to be a failure. While our nation's GDPs grow higher and higher, the quality of life for your average citizen gets lower and lower. In the supposed urban utopias, people no longer feel any sense of communal cohesion. Everyone around you seems distrusting. It's hard to feel safe in this environment, and this is very stressful on the human brain, which is programmed around the simple concepts of survival. Perhaps then a return to organized society's wild tribal roots would be the best thing for mankind and his mental sanity. At the very least, the advancement of urban society should not extinguish the knowledge of how to read and live the land, knowledge that our ancestors developed over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, knowledge that lives within us. F.R. Burnham's mission in life was to preserve the knowledge and skills required to navigate the wilderness. It is my belief that by immersing ourselves in the untamed wilderness, and by becoming comfortable in this uncomfortable setting, our people will be able to live happy, prosperous lives that are free from the stresses created by the poisons of modern society. Today on the Son of the North podcast, we are discussing scouting, rewilding, and the woodsman mindset. I'm going to share the story of one of my most recent hunting adventures, an up-close and personal encounter with some huge black bears. But before we begin our story, my friends, I must share with you some ancient ancestral knowledge, once lost, that has recently been revealed to me. On the day prior to this bear hunt, I was making an offering, a sacrifice to Dios. I made an offering of milk to the Sky Father. It was a simple sacrifice, meant simply to express my gratitude to the great God. I asked for nothing in return, and, having made sacrifice, decided to head off to bed to prepare for the upcoming hunt. That night, I dreamed that I found myself in the midst of a golden field that stretched out as far as the eye can see. Above me stretched a deep blue sky with not a cloud in sight. I tried to recall in my memory how I had gotten to this place, but I was unable to. Yet deep down, I knew that this place was within my being. Standing in that field, I was overtaken by a most wonderful, blissful feeling. A radiant warmth so powerful, yet so comforting. Above me, I heard a large bird cry out, the majestic call of a bald eagle. I turned upwards to have my suspicions confirmed. The bald eagle slowly descended through the sky, making loop after loop, crossing over the sun, before landing at my feet. The bald eagle spoke to me. He proclaimed to be a messenger of the Sky Father. He claimed that, for millennia now, the Sky Father has watched the suffering caused by the folly of his people. The adversaries, those ancient enemies of our ancestral gods, cloud the hearts of men, and their corrupting touch spreads to all four corners of Mother Earth. The wheel of time spins faster and faster. A great battle is coming, my friends. The beginning of the next great conflict between the gods and their eternal adversaries grows nearer. This conflict marks the beginning of the end of the Kali Yuga. But this end won't be quick, nor will it be painless. The upcoming battle is to be quite challenging. On the cosmic scale, the Kali Yuga is in its death throes, thrashing and raging, creating chaos for all. But on the human scale, this process will take millennia. The epoch to come, this age of conflict between the children of Dios and the adversaries, will be a defining chapter in the conclusion of this last stage of the cosmic cycle of ages. The world will be engulfed in chaos and madness. Society, as we know it, will cease to exist. The masses will find themselves trapped within the claws of the adversaries. The laws of nature will be subverted. Ancestral tradition will be abandoned. Mankind will be weak, a slave to his passions, his lusts, his addictions. Suffering will be at an all-time high. Quality of life will be poor. Food will be sparse and famine plentiful. Violence will engulf the major population centers. Neighbor will turn against neighbor. But fear not, my friends, for we are the children of Dios, mortals descended of his bloodline, and Dios and all of his children, the gods in the heavens, have not forgotten us. They have not abandoned us, and they will not consign us to this fate. This conflict between our ancestral gods and the adversaries will continue on for generations. Civilization will stagnate. The world around us will start to unravel at an unparalleled pace. The Kali Yuga accelerates faster and faster. But fear not, my friends, for I have received a message from the heavens themselves, filling me with hope and optimism for our people's future. My friends, we are fortunate, for we are living in the midst of a new folk genesis. The gods have decreed that from amongst our people, great heroes, new chieftains shall arise, and from them numerous tribes shall emerge that, over time, shall grow to be as numerous as the stars in the heavens. Living the traditional lives of our ancestors, we shall escape unscathed from the chaos and degradation of the age. The Sky Father has extended this offer to us, for we are ultimately of his blood. As the Kali Yuga rages on, these new Indo-European tribes will continue to grow, thrive, and prosper amidst the chaos. In time, a son of Dios shall arise from amongst one of these tribes to unite the various new branches of his peoples and to restore order to the cosmos. This hero shall arise from among our people, with eyes as cold and sharp as the steel he wields. His hair will appear fiery and radiant like a very emanation of Sol himself. On the eve of the anniversary of his 17th year, the boy who is to be king will distinguish himself from among his people during his initiation among the male members of his tribe. He will be married to a celestial beauty whose golden radiance will mirror even the dawn goddess Hausos herself. As fate declares, the hero king will unite all the new tribes of our peoples and will carve out a new world for our descendants from the bloated corpse of this world. Feeling their grasp on this world slipping, the adversaries will prepare for one final battle. As the Kali Yuga began with the war at Kurukshetra, so too shall a great earthly conflict herald the coming of a new golden age and the resetting of the cycles of the universe. To the hero king, Chakravartin, conqueror of all the realms of man, and the daughter of the earth goddess, will be born a son, an heir greater than any other who has been born before. Those who look upon him will see a mere baby, but within the boy lies infinite cosmic potential. This is the conquering son of Dios, the Kalki as the Hindus would refer to him, the hero, semi-divine, destined to bring an end to the Kali Yuga. As a babe, his complexion will be as white as milk, but as the boy grows, he shall take on a golden complexion and radiate an aura of warmth, compassion, and ferocity. A mortal manifestation of the unconquerable Sol himself. The semi-divine youth will rise to take over his father's throne and lead the armies of the heavens and the earth together against the adversaries. This grand cosmological event will be known as the coming of the Solar King, Dios's direct manifestation into our world. I awoke from this dream suddenly with quite a fright, and yet I felt motivated. The gods had reached out to me. Dios had spoken. The task ahead of me was clear. The good word has to be spread amongst our people. Sons and daughters of Dios, inheritors of the solar bloodline, it is my belief that if our people are to survive, we must learn to be civilized and yet savage. The evidence is right in front of us. Our ancestral myths and histories reveal how our ancestors' inner light could pierce the darkness spread by the adversarial evil. No matter which tribe, each of our great ancestors had to learn to temper the mind, the body, and the spirit. With the harsh realities of nature serving as their proving ground, these heroes learned to master all three elements of their being, and in doing so, learned to master their own universe. The gods have spoken. We must return to the harsh wilderness that birthed our people. We must return to the traditions of our ancestors. In doing so, we will learn to temper these three elements of our being. By committing ourselves to the tempering of mind, body, and spirit, we will be forging bonds of tribe and community that will ultimately create the conditions to facilitate the arrival of the Solar King, the eventual defeat of the adversary, and the establishment of a new golden age on Earth. Of course, the battle to win over the cosmos begins with a single step. To gain mastery over our universe, we must first gain mastery over ourselves. Mind, body, and spirit. These are the three primordial essences within our bodies that define our character, what are known in the divine tongue as heirs. Like the ancestors that came before us, only by training our mind, body, and spirit can we temper our three heirs and find the balance that allows one to begin their ascent to herodom. Now, at this point, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the methods used to train the mind and the body. To temper the mental heir, we read books, analyze our surroundings, abstain from addictive substances, and study the myths and histories passed down through the generations. We temper the physical heir by eating healthy food in moderation, by lifting weights, running, hiking, performing combat sports, and by learning how to take a hit and give a hit back. The tempering of these two heirs forms the foundation of self-improvement in the modern age. Perhaps unwillingly, this is something that each of the self-improvement gurus you see on social media knows already. But these gurus, despite having good intentions, mislead their flock, for they are missing out on one key ingredient of the self-realization picture. The reason why our people suffer so in the world today is because we have lost our intimate ancient connection with our spiritual heir. We may strengthen our minds and our bodies, but without tempering the spiritual heir, we are unable to reach the path of herodom. Deep down, many of our people desire to temper their spirit. But a student cannot learn without a mentor. The loss of our ancestral traditions and of knowledge on how to temper the spirit heir is symptomatic of the Kali Yuga. The gods of our ancestors have spoken to me, my friends. They have revealed to me this powerful ancient knowledge once lost. My disciples, I now share that knowledge with you today. If we are to reach the heights of potential enabled by our divine bloodline, we must learn to temper and balance all three of the heirs, mind, body, and spirit. We know that many cultures, our ancestors included, temper their spirit by immersing themselves in the wilderness. To prepare for the coming of the Solar King, we must create a tribe and culture in which we balance our three heirs. Only when we are surrounded by nature's harsh and beautiful realities will our tribe be able to temper our spirits into the force needed to balance out our mental and physical heirs. This process is known as rewilding. My disciples, I shall now speak more on the very nature of the airs themselves. In doing so, I shall explain the constitution of our very beings. Furthermore, possessing such hidden knowledge, you shall understand how the tempering and balancing of the three airs can enable one's mastery over their own world. Listen closely, my friends. The mind is the immaterial air, and enables one's being to interact with the immaterial and metaphysical world. The body is the material air, and allows one's being to interact with the material physical world. Most important of all, the spirit is the metamaterial air. In this case, metamaterial meaning transcending or being comprehensive of all materials. The spirit air enhances the mental and physical prowess of each being. It provides the central link that chains together our body's interactions with the material and immaterial world. In the midst of the Kali Yuga, knowledge of how to polish this link, how to temper the spiritual air, has been lost. Lost until this very moment. By rewilding, our people will be able to subject themselves to the harsh conditions that enabled their ancestors to temper the spirit air. In doing so, we will be able to restore the connection between our mental air and our physical air. By connecting the essences in our bodies that speak with the immaterial and material realm, we will be able to manifest the immaterial within our material world. In short, by tempering our spiritual air as well as our mental and physical airs, we will be able to unlock our full potential. Maintaining the inner balance between these three airs was an essential element in ensuring our ancestors' happiness and prosperity. You might be asking yourself, Rex, how does rewilding temper our spirit? By learning to be comfortable in the uncomfortable environment, by immersing ourselves in a realm filled with beauty but also risk and danger, we are heightening our senses, pushing ourselves above our physical and mental limits. We are tempering our spirit air. Such spiritual strengthening was part of everyday life for our ancestors, and their strong spiritual airs allowed them to perfectly link together their physical and mental abilities. Their spiritual strength allowed them to survive and thrive, allowing them to outcompete other tribes and bring further glory to our bloodline. People who don't understand the divine nature of our ancestors sometimes look at the history books with great perplexion. How were people of Indo-European descent able to change the history books? How were they able to mold fate to their whims? My friends, our ancestors' mastery over the world as we know it was enabled by their ability to unblock this link between the physical and mental essences of their being. Those among our ancestors who tempered one air with mastery but neglected the other two airs often made fools of themselves before the gods. But those who learned to find the right balance between the three airs would go on to achieve great feats that would bring admiration from the gods themselves. The momentary presence of the divine in our world during these moments of ancestral greatness creates a link between the material and immaterial worlds. A snapshot of our ancestors' triumph gets encoded into that ancestor's physical being. This memory, now physically encoded in blood, is passed on to their descendants, and so on until our bloodlines come to an end. These, my friends, are what we would call blood memories. They exist within you, within me, and all of humanity. These memories lay physically dormant within us, and by tempering the spirit, we can activate them by linking our immaterial air to the material air and the memory coded within our blood. By activating these blood memories, we are, for a period of time, calling upon the dormant spiritual air of our ancestors to empower our own mental and physical fortitude. By activating such memories, we are able to manifest potential above that of any individual human, for we are manifesting the potential of our whole ancestral bloodline. Furthermore, if we can balance the three airs and take on the path of herodom, we too can achieve great moments of triumph and create blood memories that will empower our children and their children and their children and so on. The noblest warrior and the wisest sage of the ancestral solar tradition both know that through the securing of bloodline and blood memory, immortality is achieved. By immersing ourselves in the activities and harsh environmental conditions that our ancestors were subject to for thousands of lifetimes, we are tempering our spirit and enabling our ability to access these blood memories. The revelation of lost ancestral knowledge is quite a powerful experience. Almost too powerful. I certainly felt a little overwhelmed the first time I heard it, and I'm sure you feel a little overwhelmed right now too. But I would not lie to you, my friends. This is the path going forward. Learning to strengthen and balance each of our three airs. This is the training that the gods have assigned for us in preparation for the chaos to come. I've been going on for a while now, so for now, listeners, we're going to take a quick break. During this break, I want you to ponder the path that the gods have set before us. As is a new tradition on this show, I'm going to recommend that if you've been sitting for this whole podcast, that you now get up and stretch, limber up those muscles. I'd also recommend that you go grab a drink, a nice glass of water, perhaps some milk. I'm also going to take this time to discuss a new musical project from a good friend of mine. The band is known as Soul Anahata, and they are a self-described solar metal band. They're a good group of guys I know from home back out east, fellow pagans, and yeah, I'm happy to promote their work. Honestly, it's just a great soundtrack for when you're at the gym crushing those PRs. I also really enjoy listening to the ambiance tracks on this album when I'm out going for a nice hike. So yeah, just making a shout out to my boys at the Oathblood tribe. They recently did an interview for Patra magazine, which is a new magazine promoting solar art and culture. If you want to learn more about the band and the music they make, I would definitely recommend reading out that article by Jack Donovan. You'll find the links to that article as well as the social media pages for Soul Anahata in the description of today's episode. If you want to find them on Spotify, the band is Soul Anahata, spelled S-O-L space A-N-A-H-A-T-A. Their first album is called Auspicious Atavism, and it's top-notch. I'm going to leave it on that note. Without further delay, let's progress into today's hunting story. As I'm sure you're aware, I've dedicated the past few years of my life to embracing this rewilding approach and to embracing the traditions of our ancestors. My attempts to temper my spirit have not been in vain, it seems, for recently, when I was out hunting black bears with a good friend of mine, I activated a blood memory. So I'll start today's story by telling you a little bit about my region. I live in the northern part of the Canadian province of British Columbia. The region I live in is the meeting point of three biomes: the Rocky Mountain alpine forests, the taiga forests and muskeg of the Canadian tundra, and the prairie steppe that defines Canada's interior. While this land is harsh and unforgiving on an ecological level, it is a sportsman's paradise. In fact, a good friend of mine told me that amongst locals, it's known as the Serengeti of the North, because allegedly, the game animal density here is so high that it's only comparable to the Serengeti in Africa. If you like my story today and want to hear more stories about hunting in this region, I would recommend that you check out a guy on YouTube. His account is called How to Hunt, and quite honestly, he's the inspiration for this little segment of today's episode, but he tells hunting stories from his experience as an outfitter and a guide in my region, and some of them are pretty crazy, so it really inspired me to share my own story today. Now, this northern region of British Columbia is very, very sparsely populated. We're talking about an area here that's the size of Germany with a population of less than 1 million people. Besides beautiful, untamed wilderness, the only reason why anybody ever comes up to my region of Canada is due to the oil, natural gas, and forestry industries that keep the region afloat economically. Yes, it's quite sad. Even the corrupting touch of the Kali Yuga reaches up here. But the area is still beautiful and largely untamed wilderness. Because of the oil and forestry industries, these companies have cut roads deep into the wilderness to get access to these resources. On an ecological level, this is heartbreaking for a nature lover such as myself, and the consequences of these developments on the food chain in this region is unprecedented. But, speaking on a strictly practical level, they definitely make hunting much easier. No longer does one have to walk tens of kilometers into the bush to find a moose. You can drive down these roads, which very conveniently divide territory, and it makes scouting a breeze. A good friend of mine and I had been preparing for a spring bear hunt for months ahead. We were scouting for weeks, looking for the ideal location to hunt bears. We found some great spots in the alpine forests below the northern stretch of the Rockies. This environment was ideal because bears normally hibernate on cliff sides, and they come down to these lower altitudes beside the mountains in the spring to munch on green grass to ease their digestive systems after a long, harsh winter of hibernation. My friend and I decided that we wanted to add a little bit of a challenge to our hunt, and so we decided to hunt a black bear using a compound bow. Now don't get me wrong, these compound bows are super powerful, much better than the bows that our ancestors would have used. But they are still greatly outclassed by firearms when it comes to range. If we wanted to get a good, accurate, humane shot on a black bear, we would have to creep within 40 meters, approximately 43 yards, of our quarry. Stalking this close to any animal is challenging enough, but this challenge is brought to the next level when you realize that the animal you are stalking could just as easily turn around and kill you. Last Saturday, my friend and I set out early in the morning, eager to get our chance at taking a good shot at a large black bear. We set out for the location we had scouted for weeks now, eager to spot the first bear of the day. After a good 45 minutes of driving down muddy, unkempt logging roads in the mountain passes, we eventually came upon a nice road that stretched out into a field below the base of the mountains. We followed this road, knowing that, looking up at the pipelines, we could probably find a nice bear. To facilitate pipeline development, oil companies will cut these long straight lines through the forest. I think they're called right-of-ways. But regardless, these strips of forest that are cut out eventually become full of green grass, and this is the perfect place for bears to go and feast on the green grass to clear out their digestive systems after the winter. So naturally we knew that there was going to be some bears in this area. It's pretty common, funnily enough, to find bears at the side of the road when you're driving down these old forest roads. So when we turned down a road and saw a large black object in the distance at the side of the road, we got pretty excited. We thought we finally spotted the first black bear for the day. In black bear hunting in this region, there's kind of a saying, you need to see 10 bears a day for the one possible bear that you might want to take a shot at. So we were looking for our 10 bears and we thought we spotted the first one. But as we got closer, funnily enough, we noticed that it was just a large black fluffy dog. Now, I mean, if you're in urban society, this wouldn't be super weird to just see a dog walking down the road. But you have to realize that we were hundreds of kilometers in the middle of nowhere, super far from civilization, so the presence of this dog was very weird. Regardless, we kept driving down the road, and I kid you not 100 meters down the road, we could see out into a pipeline right of way, and there was a nice big black bear munching on the grass in that pipeline. We were so nervous that this dog that was only about 100 meters down the road was going to come out and rush towards us making noise when we got out of the car and prepared to stalk the bear with the bow. So we continued driving down the road in attempts to find the dog's owner because we thought, this dog is in the middle of nowhere. The owner must be somewhere. So we eventually drove about 1.5 kilometers, so close to a mile for you Americans, down the road. And we eventually stumbled upon a truck, a rental truck that companies rent out for seasonal work in a region. So already some red flags were going off in our head. This is kind of a weird thing to find out here. But anyway, we saw this guy off in the distance. He was outside of his truck, which was parked on the side of the road, and he was kind of walking around in the field. We assumed that it was the dog's owner looking for the dog. So I parked the car and my friend got out of the car and approached the owner, to let him know that his dog was down the road and that it was interfering with our bear hunt. And sitting in the car, watching this guy, notice that my friend was there and start approaching my friend, I could immediately tell that he had this weird hostile aura about him. Like he was approaching my friend in a really not friendly, almost suspicious manner. I would imagine that my senses were pretty heightened given the activity, so it's not surprising that I noticed this dangerous aura coming from this guy. So my buddy and this weird guy chat, and then my buddy gets back into the car, and he's telling me that the guy gave off super sketchy vibes to him as well. According to my friend, he told the guy about the dog down the road and asked if he was missing a dog, and the guy said no. But then he later reneged and said that he actually was looking for this dog, and then proceeded down the road to pick up the dog. It was super strange. I'd have no idea why he'd lie. It just made him seem more suspicious. And if you're in the middle of the bush trying to do something suspicious, I don't think you'd want to act this way because it would really clue people into your behavior. But anyway, we turned back down the road towards the bear and towards the guy picking up his dog. So the guy pulls up beside the dog and opens his door and gets the dog inside the car, then quickly speeds down the road and turns right. Assuming that this weirdo was gone for good, my friend and I parked the truck at the side of this pipeline right of way, hoping that we could sneak through the bush and creep up upon this bear, hoping that it was still enjoying its feast of green grass. But weirdly enough, as soon as we parked the truck, this guy's truck, I guess he had turned around at the end of the street and he had headed back towards us. So I got out of the truck, bow in hand, and I had bear spray strapped to my waist. This guy approaches me first and he's walking very fast. That same hostile, aggressive aura. He's trying to be intimidating, but I was much taller than him and more muscular than him, so I wasn't really intimidated on a physical level. But I digress. He comes up to me and he says he just wants to introduce himself to us. He kept rambling on about his friends and some work they were doing in the area, but I was basically telling him to fuck off and that he was interrupting us in the middle of a hunt. Of course, he didn't care and was talking openly loud, and by the time we got him to fuck off finally, the bear had left the pipeline right away, so he basically ruined our chance at this bear. The whole situation is really funny in hindsight. My gut instincts were so correct, because first he had lied to my friend about, being the owner of the dog, but then he came back in a very hostile manner, approached me in a very aggressive manner, and then said he wanted to introduce himself to us. We told him that we were busy in the middle of the hunt, and then he ended up taking pictures of my friend's license plate, I guess in some pathetic urbanite attempt to be intimidating, as if he was going to report my friend's license plate to the police for hunting legally on public land. I don't understand what this guy's end game was, but in the end, the whole situation was pretty funny considering how ridiculous and paranoid he seemed. In all honesty, he's probably just some guy associated with a big meth operation up in the middle of the forest. But we're just hunters, man. We don't really give a shit. But that weird encounter did not bring an end to our day, for there were still bears to hunt. We left that road and found a different road to travel down. Eventually, as we were driving down the road, I looked off into the field and noticed a black bear sitting at the edge of a field, only about 10 meters away from the window of my truck. I immediately told my friend, and he pulled into the next available cutoff. By sheer luck, or perhaps destiny, the area where we parked was connected to a pipeline right-of-way that gave us perfect access for sneaking up on the bear in the edge of the field. Even more luckily, the wind was blowing in a favorable direction, and our scents were blowing away from the black bears and their keen sense of smell. So we began to creep down the pipeline right-of-way, and this is almost a very counterintuitive activity. Now, if you live in an area where there's lots of bears, or if you know anything about bears, when you're walking through the forest in an area where there's bears, you're often told to be very loud, because bears don't really have a great sense of vision, but they do have very good ears. So it's a good practice to be loud in the bush in order to avoid encounters with bears. Trust me, friends, you want to avoid an accidental encounter with a mama grizzly and her 3 600-pound cubs. Of course, when you're hunting bears, you don't want them to hear you, and for our purpose, we needed to creep particularly close to these bears so that we could take a shot at them with our compound bows. The act of hunting bears itself is thus so counterintuitive to your survival instincts. On an instinctual level, it's an extremely uncomfortable experience. But I think that learning to be comfortable in these moments of discomfort is essential to tempering the spirit air. By partaking in a dangerous hunt like this, you are essentially stalking an animal that can kill you. Because of this, and your body is quite aware, you have very heightened senses. At the time, my vision felt sharper than it had been in years. With this sharp vision, my buddy and I eventually spotted a large sow black bear sitting at the edge of the field. In the distance, we saw a large male black bear, probably a male that she was chasing with hopes of mating. Like all bears at this time of year, the large sow was chewing on some green grass. You can imagine the rate that my heart was beating when we were creeping up on this big mama from above. I guess this is part of the reason why people like these dangerous hunts so much. Deep down, it is an activity that stimulates these memories trapped within ourselves. Thousands of generations of our ancestors had done hunting as a major subsistence strategy. In many places, this involved competing with and even hunting dangerous game, these large predators that could eat us just as easily as we could eat them. Eventually, my friend and I were able to creep on our knees within 40 meters of the bear, close enough to take a shot with the compound bow. We waited for the right moment. The big sow had bent down to take another nibble of grass. I stood up, drew back my bow, aimed the shot at the bear's innards. The bear quickly looked up from the grass at me. The shot was let go. It soared through the air and zipped an inch above the bear's spine, a wound that would have been lethal if hit. The arrow thunked into the ground behind the bear, and the bear stood for a second confused before she sped off into the distance. I reached for another arrow, but by the time I knocked it in my bow, she was out of my reach. Another bear had escaped me, but that rush, that adrenaline, the activation of this primal energy within me was quite noticeable. This was my first time bear hunting, my first time taking a shot at a bear, and yet, in that moment, my thoughts were clear, my movements concise. It was as if I had done it hundreds of times before, hundreds of thousands of times before. This, my friend, was the activation of a blood memory. Alas, our moment of opportunity was gone, and the big black bear sow was gone as well. We got up and had a laugh about the unfortunate luck of the situation. We left the field and went to the road that we had been driving down when I spotted the bear, and walked towards where our truck was parked. We were having a good time, making a joke about the situation and commenting on how we'd actually seen the two bears. As we were returning to our truck, something suddenly caught my friend's eye, and he tapped my shoulder to notify me that we needed to quickly get down. there was another bear in the field immediately to our left. A younger bear, clumsy and naive, he had not been able to observe us with our camouflage on. We quickly bent down and prepared to crawl into the field to get closer to him. Another chance had reared its head at us. We began to stalk the bear through the field slowly. Not a single thought rushed through my head, despite the fact that normally I could not stop my brain from thinking. Those same familiar feelings took over. I felt the adrenaline rush through my system. My senses were heightened, and time once again slowed. I was comfortable, ready to make the kill. We crept closer and closer to the bear through the field. It wandered along the side, munching on some grass. Given its youth, this bear wasn't as wise as the bear we had countered before. We were able to get within 30 meters of this bear, and my friend was getting ready to take the shot at it before it stood up quickly, looked at him in the eye, and recognized the danger before itself. The bear quickly spread off into the bush, and my friend drew back a shot, but did not want to shoot it, as the bear had already scuttled into the underbrush of the glade across the street. This brief encounter between man and bear lasted all of some 1 minute, but due to the activation of this primal urge within me, these ancestral memories, the entire exchange felt like it lasted an hour. Never before have I felt my senses so in tuned, have I felt so confident in my purpose. Though this experience was super powerful, I imagine that I'm only scratching the surface of blood memories here. Just think of the potential of a community of like-minded people who are able to tap into all sorts of blood memories. Ultimately, that bear's escape signaled an end to our day, but I did not go home disheartened, nor did I go home empty-handed. I learned an important lesson. By seeking to live the lives that our ancestors lived, we are able to unlock within ourselves a sense of primal clarity and purpose. On the drive back home, my friend and I got to talking about the odd situation that we had encountered. At the beginning of the hunt, we noticed 2 bears, a male off in the distance and a large female behind him following, probably with mating anticipation. The bear that we stumbled upon in the field across the street was a younger male, it seemed. My friend, who has ambitions of being a conservation officer, shared with me his theory on that situation that day. It seemed that the young male that we encountered second was probably 2 or 3 years old. Most likely, he was the cub of the big sow that we had taken a shot at. It seems that, even after a few years, he wasn't ready to leave his mom, but nature is cruel, and Mom kicked him out. After all, her mission is to have new cubs and not to baby her old cubs. And so, this poor, lone young male was following behind Mom as she was chasing after another guy. It's kind of funny because this situation with animals makes me think about real-life struggles within our world, about how so many young men are struggling to leave home and set out to build lives for themselves. Their parents ultimately abandoned them in a world that's hostile, and they haven't had the proper education or instinct to survive in this world. Like our bear that we were about to take a shot at, it's not really these young men's fault that they're in their situation. A healthy bear and a healthy human must separate from their parents, separate from the comforts of life, and embrace the harsh reality of the world. There's a valuable lesson to learn in this, my friends. In this world, we can be the hunter or the hunted. Our world is harsh and unforgiving, so we must reject decadence and brave the wilds. The bitter conditions will temper a tough body and a tough spirit. Over the course of this week, I want you to reflect on this story and on all the lessons I've taught you today. With that, we bring this week's episode of Son of the North to a close. I hope you enjoyed your time with me today. I hope you enjoyed your temporary escape from the insanity of the Kali Yuga. My name's Rex, signing off. I'll see you next week, friends.